Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michelle Hercules, and I want to welcome you to the third OHUB Masterclass. There goes Rodney, the lead for this effort. Rodney, if you wouldn't mind, I know you're going to do an introduction.
Absolutely. Always navigating the World Wide Web and technology. So excited to see everyone today. My name is Rodney Sampson. I have the honor and privilege of serving as the executive chairman and CEO of Opportunity Hub. And as Opportunity Hub approaches its 10th year in existence, we are doubling down, double clicking on everything that we can do to bring Black people into the fourth industrial revolution. I'm incredibly excited about our Black Women in Cyber initiative brought to you in partnership with Get Cities and the Second Muse Foundation. So before we bring on our moderator and guest speaker today, please make sure that you share this across your entire ecosystem, across your entire social graph, and spread the word. We want to get as many people on the live as possible. And then, of course, this will be available on platforms after that as well. So, without further ado, I'm excited to introduce to you today Michelle Hercules, the founder and CEO of Hercules Innovative Technology Solutions. And joining her is Janine Byas, Senior Manager, Global Information Security Awareness Program at Marriott International. Welcome to OHUB.
Thank you, Rodney, for that introduction. So, as if you guys attended the last masterclass, I was graciously able to be the guest speaker at that point in time. And so I wanted to invite a dear friend of mine who is in the cybersecurity space. And based off of the topic today, due to her role, I thought she would be an excellent guest speaker just to talk about what she does in the area of security awareness. And then with the topic being the skills that you need to get into cyber, really talking about her background in the space and how she was able to get into it and giving everyone pointers on how they could get into this space. So, welcome, Janine. I thank you dearly for taking the time out of your schedule to talk with us. And I thank you. With that, if you wouldn't mind just giving like an introduction.
Yeah, sure. My pleasure. Thank you for having me today. Um, I actually had a very non-traditional path into cybersecurity, and I think that's one of the things that you'll hear me, just reiterate throughout the session today. There is not one straight line into this industry, and there is a lot of people who have transferable skills, maybe interested in a career change or maybe don't realize that something that they are interested in also is related to cybersecurity and there's room for them at the table.
Mm-hmm.
So my background initially was really in retail and then education, and eventually I um, came out to Washington D.C. to finish my schooling. I have a degree in history, and I did an internship at the Department of State. And a fun story, quick one. When I was there as an intern, I ran into somebody who had been a career, Foreign Service officer for a while and at the State Department. And I had a just natural curiosity and propensity to fall into conversations with people passing in the hallways. I think it's maybe something that comes from my upbringing. But this individual was talking to me and they're like, okay, so what are you studying? What are you majoring in? I'm like, history. And they're like, well, what are you going to do with a history degree? It's just, if only you knew. But I'd like to go back to that person now because cybersecurity was not on my radar when I was having that conversation with that individual. Um, but anything in government obviously has a very serious focus on information security. I mean, and that is at the
Absolutely.
core of all of the work that's happening. And so that was my first foray and introduction into information security. I worked for a bureau that supported all of the embassies and their public facing efforts. So websites, social media, And then very quickly, we had an assistant secretary who led our bureau and wanted to bring in Wi-Fi
Oh.
at the time, and that was only like 7 years ago. But people were still, had their desktop computers and were hardwired at the
Mhm.
desk, and we were like radically trying to change everything, bringing in laptops and mobile phones and Google and Zoom at the time.
Mm.
And I had the opportunity over the course of my internship to become a contractor. And
Mhm.
I was a program analyst first, and then developed over the 4 years into a senior program manager, where I got to lead initiatives teaching public affairs, foreign service officers how to use things like Salesforce. And so, again, always an underpinning current of information security, right? It's all about keeping people's information safe and
Absolutely.
also making sure we're keeping the information that we're working with secure and on the right platforms. So that was my introduction into it. From there, I went to a large nonprofit called Care USA. They're the originators of the care package, and they have a really fun origin story. After
Yes.
World War II, they purchased like the ration packets from the US Armed Services, and they sent these out. They sold them, I think, for like $10. Don't quote me on the price, but I
For
think it was
sure.
like $10. And they sent these packages out to displaced persons in Europe. And in many instances, that care package delivery was the only way that people were able to find out where their loved ones were
Mm.
actually located.
Well, how nice is
And
that?
so, yeah, it
Yeah.
grew over time. But being such an old organization, there was a lot of technical debt there. And so, things like information security, while they're always a part of any organization, the idea of cybersecurity as its own discipline, separate from information technology,
Yes.
is new for a lot of organizations, especially older ones like that nonprofit. So I had the opportunity to do things like incident response and communications at all levels of the organization. I ran a global service desk and ultimately ended up standing up their cybersecurity awareness program. And from there, and this is like
Full
coming to an end
circle.
here, but from there, I went to a small cybersecurity firm based out of Louisiana, where I did
Mhm.
incident response. And over the course of the year and a half that I was with them, led their marketing efforts. Incident response is really exhausting, and in
Mhm. Absolutely.
cybersecurity, there's not really anything that's sort of regulated where they say, okay, you have nurses and firefighters and police officers, and they have these schedules that they work. Um, Cybersecurity incident responders, that's not always a thing, and so you can get burned out really quickly in cybersecurity incident
Absolutely.
response. So I decided to take a step back from that, and I went to work for Marriott earlier this year in March, running their global information security awareness and training program. So I'll take a breath there.
Well, now you see why I invited Janine to talk with us today. Um, I want to circle back to when you mentioned that your degree was in history, and
Mhm.
something that I've done before in the cybersecurity space is really look at skill sets even outside of the typical computer science or cybersecurity majors, because there is so much information or processes that you have to do related to reading policy, writing, communications. And so one of the things I'd like for you to talk about is like the skills, the soft skills or skills that you wouldn't necessarily think would be helpful for someone in the cybersecurity space.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, traditionally speaking, people understand that cybersecurity developed out of like military needs, right? And
Sure.
so when we think about who the traditional profile is of the typical cybersecurity analyst or somebody who's working in the space, those technical SMEs have hard skills that, we don't realize kind of fit in one column. But in order to have any real movement in cybersecurity, you have to
Mm.
think about people. And when you're working with people, there's a lot of other skills that are required. Communications is definitely one of them.
Yeah.
Written, being able to tell a story and understand data and communicate how what is being seen on the technical side translates into real human behavior, and how do you go
Absolutely.
after that? So there's even space for change management professionals, right? People
Hmm.
who understand the psychology of human beings and how to move people and organizations from point A to Z, right?
Hmm.
Um, Understanding how to problem solve and think critically is really
Hmm.
important. There are technical subject matter experts who can look at, sheets and sheets of data. I mean, literally, like they're just spitting out spreadsheets, right? And
Absolutely.
they don't necessarily know how to translate that to an organization's business objectives, right? They can
Hmm.
tell you in this point in time, this situation happened and it was an anomalous
Hmm.
activity.
Hmm.
But over the course of, a quarter, how does that trend track with something that the organization is focused on in their key business objectives, right? And how does that influence and inform the decisions that they're making in investments? Um, I often joke with colleagues about the ability to put a presentation together, right? Like
It's very
there's
important.
there's always those cringeworthy PowerPoint presentations that we all have to sit through, and you're like, okay, who decided to put Comic Sans, right? And the little newspaper clipping meme on the thing, and you're just like,
Right.
putting a deck together is more than just, hey, make it pretty. It really takes a skill set to understand what information you're trying to put forth and convey to which audiences, and how to package that in a visually compelling way,
Hmm.
so that people can understand it and not have to sit there and be explained through the entire deck. So there's a host of skill sets that go into it, and I think um, what is key for individuals who are maybe trying to break into cyber from
Hmm.
other career paths, or thinking about cybersecurity as they're moving through their college career path, is you have to figure out what are you maybe naturally good at, or
Hmm.
where do you have skills that you can talk about as relatable to
Sure.
business objectives, because that is universal no matter where you are. And then how do you help fill in areas where traditionally those skills have been overlooked in cybersecurity?
I couldn't agree with you more because, as you mentioned before, burnout is real. And so, if it's something that you don't necessarily have a passion for, then that burnout will happen even sooner. And so, when you are able to find something where it piques your interest and you're able to build off of that, I completely agree. And what you mentioned also in the communication realm, I believe it's one and the same, right? In order to get your message across, you really have to come up with a strong communication plan and package in order to make sure that all levels within your executive body or your management body or your workforce, they understand what their part is
Yeah,
within whatever that strategic effort is in the cybersecurity
absolutely.
space.
Absolutely. The ability to develop coalitions
Hmm.
and help people come together and build consensus is really important. So, um, I would say that having the ability to develop business acumen is really important.
Absolutely.
We talk a lot about, the professional skills you need in a workplace. Business acumen is something I think that gets overlooked a lot and tends to be taught if you're going through like a management program or you
Yes,
have a really great
yes.
mentor. But there's a lot of ways to learn, and get a lot of that ability under your belt, that doesn't have anything to do with schooling or having the job. You can go do research and look at the types of things that are needed, because when you are in a leadership position, and that can be from, lead wherever you are, you don't have to be the highest person in the
Mhm,
organization to lead, but you do need to understand how to convey messages
mhm,
and thoughts in clear, concise ways, and bring insights to the table that maybe other people are not surfacing. A lot of people are quick to respond. A lot of people might be louder than you, but if you can
Mm-hmm.
find a way to surface insights that, maybe are being missed and some of the nuances of what you're dealing with, you're going to begin to be sought after as an expert in somebody's perspective who is valued.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you circled back to business acumen, because I think a lot of times when you see that on a job description, the question is, well, what does that mean? So I appreciate that you broke that down. But let's go into being maybe the softest voice in a
Mhm.
room, but still being able to get your message across. As Black women in cybersecurity, um, a lot of times it takes a skill of being able to negotiate, and then also to um, be engaging, but then also to be stern. And so, what have been some of your tricks to,
Yeah.
to get over mansplaining, as the
Mhm.
term is?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that, you know, having been in the space for about 10 years, um, I've dealt with everything from ageism, like, oh, somebody thought I was 23 when I was 30, and they brought me in with a group of younger people and had to talk to me about, like, when you're older, and I'm like, How do
I'm
they
older.
think I am? I'm 30. I'm not 20. I didn't just graduate
Sure.
college, and even if I did, like, this is not probably how you should be talking to me. But as a Black woman, on top of that, in a space where there's a lot of men, um, oftentimes you have to fight for your voice to be heard,
Sure. Yeah.
and you have to balance that role very delicately because there's a lot of preconceived notions. We hear a lot about implicit bias and all
Absolutely.
of those
And that's
things,
real.
and they're real. It's
Hmm.
real. Um, and it doesn't have to be that every person experiences it or acknowledges that it exists for it to be real. Um, but it is. I've experienced it, and
Same
it
here.
can it can be deflating. Of course, you have to muster the energy to still speak your truth and your knowledge. And
Hmm.
sometimes at points when you might be the most knowledgeable person on a topic, but they're looking over your head at somebody else for who
Hmm.
knows what reason. So I try to always maintain an even keel.
Hmm.
There's a couple of reasons for this. One is I have no poker face when
Right.
it
We
comes.
share that.
I have no like if I'm playing poker, yes, I'm great at that. Catch me in any kind of actual like board game or card game, I'm great. But when it comes to the workplace,
Yeah.
I don't have a great poker face. I'm not like naturally not a very patient person
Hmm.
when it comes to somebody talking to me as if I don't know anything. Like I just, you know, this is
It's
my first
insulting.
day at any job ever. Um, so I have to go through the mental steps and
Hmm.
preparation. Emotionally, sometimes on a daily basis, there's a checklist of like, okay, I'm going to stay calm and I'm going to listen. I think ultimately, whoever's talking, they just want to know that they're heard.
Yeah.
And so I'll let people talk. I will listen to what they're saying and often be the person who summarizes. So I've learned not to be repetitive, but
Right.
additive in my comments. And so that
Hmm.
I made before about as you're listening, let people talk. You don't have to fight for all of that space. There's going to come a moment where people are going to say, "Hey, we haven't heard from you."
I was just about to say, to that point, a lot of times, if I'm in a meeting, I kind of look to the person that's not saying anything, because just based off of someone's body language or even my approach, similar to you, there's an art in listening. And
Mhm.
so I'll look at the individual's body language, and you kind of know who is pulling the strings. It's not
Mhm.
always the person that's talking the most. It may be the person that's quiet and they shoot an eye at someone, and then that next person says what they're thinking. And
Yeah.
so yeah, there is an art in being able to read body language and being able to, as you said, we have to be even keel. There are
Yeah.
numerous times where it's just like, okay, I wish I could possibly speak in a manner than some of my coworkers do, but I cannot because I would be perceived in a certain way. And so I would be remiss if I didn't say, so one of the things that the Masterclass is offering is office hours. And so I know we talked a lot about like the soft skills and negotiating skills, but these are things that we could talk in greater detail during the expert sessions.
I think it's really
Sorry, go ahead.
important. I think it's really important for people, women in particular, but I think a good note for people in general. You don't have to be the first one with an answer. What you're going to say and what you're going to add to the conversation is ultimately far more important than jumping in and being one of the first. Those individuals are going to surface some of the most obvious things. And if you can take all that information in, distill it, and then add something and a perspective or an insight or thought that somebody hasn't come to the table with, that really cuts to the heart of the challenge or what they're trying to accomplish, that speaks more than just being heard all the time, right?
Absolutely.
Everybody's familiar with that loudest voice, the person who dominates the conversation. But the other side of that is also when you feel like something is important and needs to be said and hasn't been said, you need to speak up. And you need to
Absolutely.
stand up for the things that matter to you. Often, where I found my space is being the voice for groups that are not heard, and whether
Same.
that's a customer,
Yep.
whether that's colleagues, whatever that might be in the different roles that I've had. You have to find out how, like, we're trying to get representation too. And there's always going to be somebody on the other side of the table when you're doing a job, because ultimately, when you're doing a job, you're working for a business. There's a mission, there's a business objective. How do you bring the voice of the customer, the voice of your colleagues, the voice of your stakeholders to the table so that they're present in that decision making process and how you're
Absolutely.
going to achieve those objectives?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And so now let's pivot to the harder skills, right? And so I think it's a balance of going to like different boot camps. And so do you have any suggestions on some top security boot camps or training and certifications to
Yeah,
pursue?
so there's a handful that I would share. I've found Cybrary to be really great. They offer such a wide array of training, and the
Yes.
modules are really great in the way that they break it down and in like every topic that you can think of. So I like Cybrary. And then there's also Try Hack Me. So if you're somebody who's interested in the actual, like, you want to be a security analyst, a pen tester, anything in that space, get into an environment that allows you to lab test, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's one thing to like sit and read a book or sit and watch a video. It's another thing to have an environment where you actually get to work with a virtual machine, or you actually
Mm-hmm.
get to like click buttons and do things and write code and look at data sets.
Yep.
Um, so Try Hack Me is really great for that. Actually, during this holiday season, they have the Try Hack Me Advent um, calendar of events. I haven't done that because I don't have the time yet, but a lot of people get excited about that. Obviously, one of the biggest institutions in this space is SANS,
Yes.
and their community is large and they offer a lot of different programs from, again, those hard skills all the way up to managing and information security. Um, they have recently, in the last few years, started to develop partnerships with
Mm-hmm.
HBCUs and also their own Cyversity program, which offers scholarships to underrepresented groups. So there's a lot there in the SANS community. Their regular training courses can be a lot, and you don't
Sure.
actually. Here's a little tip: you don't have to take the courses in order to do the next step, which is get a GIAC certification. That's GIAC. So I would look at whether you feel comfortable with like purchasing the set of books for any given
Mm-hmm.
certification that you're wanting. And then a lot of the GIAC certifications, they actually are open book. because they just cover so much material. So
Yes.
the tip there is to, not necessarily read because you want to remember everything you're reading. Read, outline, make a table of contents, make a why is the word escaping me? An index of all your vocabulary
Yes.
terms, right?
Yes.
And then take
There's so many
that,
acronyms. Yes.
right? Take that with you into your course and you're going to do fine.
Right. And then again, I would be remiss as well as a part of the masterclass. Everyone that signs up for an office hour also gets access to IBM Skills Build. And so Ronnie has asked me to take a closer look at the offerings. And so if there is an interest there, I'll probably be creating a cohort, or I will have office hours, almost like a TA office hour, to help individuals navigate through the tool and have a better understanding on how the course offerings meet what they're trying to get. But the listing that Janine provided, as well as the offering that the masterclass provides with IBM Skills Build, is really, really good information. Like, one of the things that I mentioned in my masterclass is that with the amount of positions out there in the cyberspace and the lack of knowledge in some of the spaces, right now is the most opportune time just to, one, upskill or reskill and get your certs, and then also just talk to individuals in the space. As you could see why Janine is one of my peer mentors, right? So when you're working in the space, it's nice to have a village. So when you are working on an effort, you could say, hey, I'm thinking about doing it like this. Is there something that you would suggest, or should I look into a course to, get stronger in this area? And so, no, those were excellent suggestions. What I was going to add. Sorry, go ahead. No, finish.
I want to add that a lot of professional development, whether it's cybersecurity or any other industry, a lot of it is about that network. So, having a tribe is one thing. There's the people that you're going to bring around you because they're going to champion you, you're going to champion them. And it's not necessarily that they're going to be giving you a job or you're going to be giving them a job. That's a different thing. But one of the things I've been most pleasantly surprised about, and that I encourage people to do, is reaching out to establish real connections, not because you want something from somebody. Like I said, you're looking for a job or whatever. If you hear somebody giving a talk at a conference, or you are in a webinar or something, and there's something that genuinely resonates with you that they're talking about, whether it's a project or a perspective, reach out to them. Tell them why you're interested in them and what they've spoken about. Tell them where you feel like your interests may align, and ask something specific in order to connect. It's, the day, like, hey, can we grab a quick coffee? Everybody kind of knows what that's about. But if you can come with a specific ask, and again, thinking with a thoughtful and insightful lens, to make a genuine connection with somebody, most often people want to help.
Absolutely.
Want to help. Not trying to sell them something, not trying to say like, okay, I'm in the market. Everybody knows people want opportunities. But the best way to build a professional network that for the long term is going to generate opportunities for you, whether it's other work, opportunities, or whether it's insights when you're working on a project and you're like, hey, I know this person over here works at that company, and that's something that we need a solution on. Develop authentic relationships, and don't be afraid to reach out to somebody, even CEOs and executives of other sorts. Like, people are much more willing to help out and connect with you. So if you're on LinkedIn, don't just send the connect, button. Take the time to write a little note about why you want to connect. It may pay off dividends.
Excellent points. Excellent points. And really and truly, one of the reasons that I'm here is because of the relationship Rodney and I formed at a networking event, and where I told him that I really wanted to be a part of his effort and support however I can, and that I would bring my friends and my team in to help and assist. And so therein lies an example. But Janine, key points. What you will find is that the majority of us want to help and find the next faces in cyber. We want to be able to promote more women in cyber, to get to higher levels and to get the knowledge and insight that they need. And so valid points. What I was going to ask Janine is, would you mind, for those that just aren't familiar with what a security awareness program is, do you mind just kind of walking through what that looks like?
Yeah, sure. So on its surface, and the simplest way to talk about it is basically you're trying to teach people not to click on phishing emails. Like,
Right.
that's the gist of it. It's more complicated than that and much more far-reaching than phishing emails. But our job as security awareness professionals, and this space is something that developed really more recently when we're talking about the trajectory of cybersecurity
Sure.
professions. This is something that SANS came out with a certificate for security awareness professionals, I think maybe like 4 or 5 years ago.
Mhm.
So this space is rapidly developing, and it's new to the information security space.
Mhm.
In this year's cycle, we're now transitioning from security awareness to human risk management, right?
Everything is
That
human
has,
centric.
right,
Absolutely.
different undertones. One started with, we've got to push out content and we've got to push out communications and make a poster and,
Yes.
you know, do all of this stuff that was really marketing, right?
Mhm.
But it was so much more than that. There's so many different skills that are involved in that. But you just very candidly, right? People in that space often were told, like, you're just doing communications. It's something that I've
Mhm.
even heard this year, not necessarily in my current
Sure.
capacity, but as I'm talking to other people in the space, it's like, you're just doing communications where all these other
So much
people are
more.
doing the hard skills, and it's not.
So much
Again, you
more.
have to be able to analyze and interpret data and make that make sense for business
Absolutely.
objectives. You have to understand human beings. So there's an element of psychology and sociology. There's cultural implications. You have to
Mhm.
understand how, if you're working for an international organization, you also have to understand how laws impact you across borders
Mhm.
and the different things that
Absolutely.
people need to learn because they are compelled to comply with international laws in various countries and regions. Um, there's so much involved in this space. And
Sure.
so, as we're seeing this transition to people talking about this as human risk management,
Mhm.
um, you're starting to get more people looking at the different disciplines.
Yep.
So, a data analyst, right? A content specialist, a
Mhm.
web manager, all different types of things that are needed. That is not just, hey, there's a person that can make pretty PowerPoints,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
So it's really interesting. We have annually Cybersecurity Awareness Month, which I tell people is like tax season in the United States for security professionals.
You're being
Um,
kind. Yes.
yeah, yeah. But so what is great about it is that you're in a space where you get to take something very serious and that people are used to, like, their interactions are usually only negative, right? You clicked on an email, you answered that call, and you gave that person the remote access to that system.
Mhm.
You stored that data in an insecure place. And we're trying to, like, change that. We're trying to shift that paradigm to where people are, like, engaged and excited to hear and see security awareness content because you don't want to be the department of no, right? And so we focus on partnerships. We focus on being that voice for the
Mhm.
frontline associates. And it's really exciting when you get to pull in experts from all kinds of places. And we had somebody from the CIA, a former
Mhm.
CIA analyst, who came and talked about insider risk, and was able to tell some actually really interesting and exciting stories, but to convey to people that if you work in an organization, you intrinsically, right,
Mm-hmm.
expose risk unintentionally
Absolutely.
to the
Yep.
company just because of the level of access that you have. And so being able to find different ways to bridge that gap for people, looking at different learning styles and learning paths, language, culture,
Mm-hmm.
all of that is really exciting for me. And you have to understand um, people, but you also have to be able to speak to the technical subject matter experts as well. You have to be able to sort of be that translator in between both worlds.
Absolutely. The liaison role is what I call it. So you have to be knowledgeable enough to talk to the executive leadership that just really want the ABCs. They want an executive memo. What are the issues? And they want to know what the remediation efforts are if you're dealing with the inspector general. For the technical individuals, they don't want the fluff. They want to know exactly what that vulnerability scan issue is. They want to know exactly what the critical root cause issue is so they could come up with a technical solution. And then you have the individuals in between that just want to be able to understand how it impacts their position. And so talking about position, do you want, and you mentioned this a little bit, but do you want to talk about the different job families and different positions that is in cyber? Because cyber has the term cyber, I know, I'll help and assist with this one, but the term cyber is so broad,
so much.
right?
Yeah,
It's so broad, but I feel like particularly for women, the term cyber is a tad bit intimidating because they think it's the incident response side and going and doing penetration testing and the hacking. And it's so much more, right? And I'm glad we were able to have the conversation about how important the communication side is but I'll let you add on to that. Are there any high level positions?
Yeah.
And I'll put a part B to that too.
Yes.
Since you worked in the government space, nonprofit space, consulting space, and then private global entity space, your thoughts on the different positions?
Yeah, so I'm gonna just say two quick things. One
Sure.
is I see there's a couple of comments in there, and
Oh,
thanks
sure.
everybody for that. Forgive me if I say anybody's name wrong, but Moyo, yes, program management, that's like my Zen space, and translates directly into cybersecurity. In many organizations, there is a project management office,
Mm-hmm.
and so right there, you translate right in. You don't have to be the technical SME in order to be a program manager in cybersecurity. So
Mm-hmm.
have that confidence, just sort of your natural ability to stay organized, be detail oriented, put together a program plan, keep the various project players on the path, surface issues, understand the dependencies, develop things, and make sure that they get delivered on
Mm-hmm.
time and on budget, and communicate to your executive stakeholders. Project management probably is like, I think, one of the biggest gaps that's
Absolutely.
needed in cybersecurity, because the technical folks are like this. If you give them software, tell them what you want them to do with it, they're just going to make it happen. But turning a switch on does not automatically mean that it works for human beings, right? Or that it translates into a process that the business can actually get a benefit from. But again, let's kind of start at, go ahead.
Right, and I'll add on to that. I would say the traditional quality assurance role is transitioning into this program management role, right? And I think for some organizations, they do have, for those that aren't looking to go to like the highest level of leadership, they're creating really strong project management positions where it's kind of a sweet spot where you have access to work in a lane that you want from a cybersecurity standpoint. You have a team. You don't have to people manage. You just manage projects, entities, or if you're doing like POAMs, like so yeah, the program management is an area that's growing, and you could actually kind of make it your own depending on your skills.
Absolutely. I'd also say, and I've mentioned this a couple times, data analyst, being able to do reporting is critical in this space. Again, there's a lot of information, a lot of data that's being generated, all these different platforms that are, showing what activity is happening
High
across your
volume. Yep.
endpoints, right? All of these things that are going on. And you have to be able, as Michelle said, to distill information to executives at the highest level, to board members. And you also have to be able to tell individual teams, right? This is how this data is impacting your work, or how what you're doing is impacting, again, that higher level business objective. So, people who like data, people
Mm-hmm.
who like, things like Tableau,
Mm-hmm.
not my, I don't like math. So it's not my space. But I do like getting the numbers and then being
Mm-hmm.
able to help tell the story. Um, so there's a space really for everybody. And yes, if you're looking to have professional growth and climb the ladder, whether it's on the corporate side, whether it's in the government, because
Mm-hmm.
there is a massive effort happening in the government right now to
Massive.
hire folks with cybersecurity skills.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's opportunity everywhere. And what I would say is, look at the things that you are naturally interested in and the things that you have excelled, whether it's in your educational career. Do you like doing research? Because you could be a threat intel analyst, right?
Absolutely.
There's so many things. Um, do you want to work on a team, or do you want to work more independently and be an individual contributor? Do you
Great
want to
point.
lead? There's so many different aspects, and I'm going to point it back to SANS for one. They've got a cybersecurity skills roadmap. So there's a lot of different things you can look at. Their courses are a good place to get an idea of the breadth of
Mm-hmm.
opportunities that there are in cyber. Even if you're not like going to go take a SANS course,
Mm-hmm.
you can see all the different pathways that you might be able to take by looking at the course offerings. And the same thing with things like Cybrary and TryHackMe as well. So something literally for everyone.
I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. So I know we have like 15 more minutes, and there's so many more topics that we could go into. I think we covered some of the comments. So is there anything that you want to share from like a voluntary standpoint? I know that you've done a lot of work in the volunteer space. Do you want to share anything related to that?
Yeah. So one of the things that I think is really interesting right now is that there's a coordinated effort to develop mentorship programs and
Absolutely.
community to support underrepresented groups, and namely Black women in cybersecurity. There's an organization I got connected with a couple years ago, 2 years ago now, called Reboot Representation.
Mhm.
And I'm going to reference some of my notes here because they did a report. And this is an example how, well, you were at a conference and you saw Rodney, you connected with OHUB through that. Um,
Mhm.
I was watching, this is like the second year of the pandemic, I was watching a virtual conference, I think on women in tech, and they had Dawana Franklin Davis, who's the CEO for Reboot Representation. And I was just like, she's amazing. I
Yeah.
was in a space where I was like surrounded by a lot of homogeneity. And I was like, how do we bring, what she's talking about into this group of people who like look out and it's a sea of sameness. Um, so I mentioned her to an individual who I worked with that had come to me the prior year interested in diversifying
Mhm.
their security operations center. And we reached out and connected with her, and she was more than willing to talk to us. She ended up really helping us drive the message home to our executives, and we
Mhm.
started an internship program. But they're really focused on the idea that, tech companies in
Mhm.
particular have um, a lot more ability, right, through their philanthropic and corporate social
Absolutely.
responsibility spending to make an impact in this space. So they have grants that they offer to nonprofits and other organizations that are focused at least 75% of their spending on
Mhm.
increasing underrepresented women, which is Black, Latinx, and Native American as well, in computer science. So I started mentoring with them, and I really enjoy it. The National Cybersecurity Alliance also started a mentorship program this fall, and I've been mentoring with them. And then I have people who are in my professional network who reach out to me and they'll say, "Hey, I know somebody who's either trying to break into cyber from a different um, career, or they're just finishing school and they're looking for how to get started. And can I connect them with you and you can talk to them about your path in?" And a lot of the conversation that we're having now, right? But when you get to talk
Mhm.
one to one with somebody, you really get to focus in on what they're trying to achieve, and you can be a lot more personal in terms of,
Right.
where can I offer you
Right.
insight from my experience that help? So I would say don't be afraid, again, to reach out to folks, to ask for
Mhm.
connections, to say, "Hey, I'm interested in governance, risk, and compliance," right? "I'm interested in privacy and data, and I see that you're connected to so and so over
Yes.
anywhere," right? "Hey, you're over at Google.
Yeah.
Um, can you introduce me? Because I really would like to learn more about that and understand what skills I need, or how what I've been doing might translate into that environment." Again, not starting with, "Hey, can you introduce me to so and so because I'm
Right.
looking for a job right now?"
Right.
Um, but I
Yeah.
think, understanding that there are a lot of programs right now that are being developed to
Right.
focus on us in this space is really important. And then
Absolutely.
finally, just taking the time to make connections and let other women in this
Mhm.
space know that we're here and available is really important. So when we talk about volunteerism, um, there's always this idea that, like, once you reach a place, you need to reach back and help pull
Absolutely.
other people up with you.
Right.
So for anybody that's on the line, like, please, feel free to shoot me a message on LinkedIn. I
Or the
Yeah, or
the open
or
hours.
yeah, there's that as well. I will
Yes.
connect you to the open hours that
Yes.
also, but I really don't want to preclude anybody. Like, if you have a genuine interest
Yeah.
in connecting and you have a clear ask, right? Reach out. And
Absolutely.
Michelle and I, Rodney, will all get you connected with the right resources. Opportunity Hub has a ton, and building that community, because it is difficult to be in this space as a woman. It's difficult to
Yes.
be in this space as a woman of color, and depending on whatever your age range, whatever your social economic background has been, whatever your educational opportunities have afforded you, you're coming to the table in a different starting point than what the traditional person in this space has.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better. No, thank you so much, Janine. Everything that you said, I echo. There's a network here. And as Janine was mentioning, wholeheartedly, we do want to create well, through my company, one of the things that I do is try to create a pipeline. And so creating these relationships, the sponsorship that this effort has here, um, we really do want to not only build awareness, increase exposure to for other African American females, but really come up with action plans, or at least connect you with experts that are in the area, so you feel more comfortable in pursuing a position in cybersecurity, that you have the confidence and know that the skill sets are transferable. And then you could get trained up. And then you have an ear or someone here that can truly help you. And so,
Yeah. I think
Janine,
that's so
I could
critical.
talk to you forever,
Yeah.
as you
I,
know.
I yeah, I just want to add, I think it's so critical that we focus on those transferable skill sets and your
Absolutely.
experience. Um, a lot of programs focus on now, right,
Mhm.
earlier education
Yeah,
and trying to reach people before they finish their university experience. And that's important. That is absolutely important. We need to be reaching out to the younger generations, but there's also an existing need for people who have career experience, even if it's not in
absolutely.
cybersecurity, to come into this space and lend that project management expertise, lend that graphic design, multimedia,
Everything.
data analyst, all of those things are needed now. And people who have career experience, maybe in other industries, can bring that in and make an impact and make a difference now. The other thing I'm going to say is, if you are looking to start your career in cybersecurity and you have no work experience, one of the things it's a known issue is this idea of the entry level analyst, right? And so
Please talk about that. Yes.
you're going to see a lot of job postings that say entry level, right? Or tier one this. And you'll read the job description and you're like, okay, it said entry level, but like it's asking me for 2 years of experience.
2 to
right?
5 years. Right.
2 to 5 years, yes. Or it's saying I should know how to do all of these things independently already. Or I should be able to demonstrate that I've got experience having done this somewhere already, which is not entry level.
Yeah.
So I think there's work that needs to be done internally with companies. And I will say there's a lot of conversations in the people management or HR
Absolutely.
departments of longstanding organizations who are new to specifically recruiting and retaining talent in cybersecurity. Hiring practices can be discouraging, and it's really important for those who are leaders in organizations to have open and candid conversations with their HR departments about what the realities of hiring and retaining talent in this space are. And when we say that a certain job needs to be done, and we're saying it's entry level, then those hiring managers and the team members that exist already have to be willing to invest the time to train up people and not expect them to walk in on day one, hand them, their managed detection and response service and say, go monitor this entire client's, network of endpoints.
Exactly.
Or their phishing help desk and say, go analyze all of this in the sandbox to figure out if these are malicious links. There's a lot of people in cybersecurity who are willing to take the time to train, but there's a lot of people who, because of the demands of the industry right now, and because of the very real threat that
This is
exists
true.
and the seriousness of experience a breach in an incident, they may only be able to hire at an entry level budget, but they actually need somebody with more experience.
Absolutely.
So I would say don't get discouraged, read through, but when you're approaching these things, talk about the transferable skill sets that you have. You don't have to go get a university degree in order to get a job in cybersecurity. Things like Cybrary, things like TryHackMe, things like the IBM Skills Build, working with groups like Opportunity Hub are going to help give you that inside track so that you can train yourself up. And a lot of cybersecurity is stuff that's happening on the fly anyway when you're talking about doing the job in practice. So it's a lot like people will say, would you rather have book smarts or street smarts? A lot of cybersecurity is street smarts. A lot of it's street smarts.
Right.
And the book smarts comes because you're learning policy and you're learning regulations and you're learning tools and things like that. But you can learn yourself in whatever path that you're trying to break into cybersecurity. If you want hard skills, there are a lot of platforms out there that will allow you to do self-guided learning, and some at no cost.
Excellent, valid points. One thing I'll add to that too, there's a number of individuals that are getting into cybersecurity from a consulting standpoint, and also utilizing upskilling and reskilling because there's so much opportunity in the space. So that's another way of getting in as well, just to say, hey, I really do want an opportunity. And because there are companies that are just truly bleeding for cybersecurity experts, if that consulting company is willing to cross-train you, bring you up, and then you could get a quote unquote entry level position. A lot of times what they'll do is like have you shadow someone who is already experienced. And so when they are placing their individual, they're saying, I'll give you 2. You're going to get a experienced hire, and then you might get a junior who's really learning but getting firsthand experience. And so, with my company, these are some of the things that we try to help get you the training that you need. And then if there are opportunities through our community, we're able to say, hey, this person's looking for an opportunity. They have the skill set, but we could line them up with someone else to help them just get entry.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think just in general, talking about cybersecurity outside of like, this is a career path that I'm pursuing, and so I need to learn XYZ. Getting comfortable with talking about cybersecurity in just your regular everyday conversations is something that I think will help you a lot. Like, I will say this, I'm the person in my family who's like, I joke about, I'm like, okay, the help desk is coming, right? But no joke, when I was launching the security awareness program for that nonprofit 5 years ago, my mom had some health issues and I ended up
Yeah.
being her primary caregiver. And I literally was reviewing different vendors to help with our course material. And
Mhm.
I had her sit with me. My mom is 76
She's
now.
so sweet.
But I had her sit with me to learn all of this information as I was reviewing the different vendor modules. And as she became more independent in the world again, she was able to lean on that experience of having gone through that education with me and stop multiple, we call them attacks, right? Attempts at scams. People who would call her up and say, "This is the Social Security
It's
Administration. We
infuriating.
need to get this." And she would start. My mom is that person who, like, if she worked for your company and she was in cybersecurity, like she tried to hack the hackers and like have a conversation with the person sending you a phishing email, and like they will hang up on her. So it's important to start having these conversations in our regular life with the people that we know and love, but
Absolutely.
also at work with people who are not necessarily considered the IT experts or the cybersecurity experts, which are two completely different disciplines,
Absolutely.
because it underpins the work that everybody's doing. And it is a starting point to normalize conversations about a topic that is often very scary.
Janine, the information that you provided, it is just a gem. And so I can't thank you enough for talking today. Again, I'm kind of speechless at everything that we went over, because what Janine provided you was insight on someone who didn't traditionally start in the cybersecurity space, but worked her way in and is working in a training space. And so I think with this masterclass, you were able to get a full picture of how it is to truly get into this space. And so again, I thank you greatly. I know we have 1 minute left. A couple things to say is, again, as a part of the masterclass, we have expert open hours where you could select a time to speak with an expert, or just to get some mentorship insight. And so we definitely ask you to sign up for that. Also, we are going to be offering, OHUB is going to be offering some cybersecurity cohort focused courses related to cybersecurity, where you will also have an expert in the space as a TA. We're still working that out and identifying the numbers for that. So again, if you're interested in that, please, in office hour, you could also express your interest in that. But I would like to thank everyone for attending today. For everyone that did attend, it really does. It shows your commitment to your craft, or actually getting into cyber. And so, let's continue to work together. In the next masterclass will take place on January 19th. Rodney, thank you for bringing me back to moderate and actually just talk with my friend here on the platform. So I thank you all. And with that, we'll bring this masterclass to a close.
Thanks so much for having me, Michelle and Rodney.
Thank you again, Janine.